Hey everybody, VR Gaming Fan here. There's been a lot of noise about the minimum 90 frames per second in order to have VR where you don't get nauseous. And I heard it from everyone before I got my Vive, and I just took it as fact that that's the way things were. That if you had less than 90 frames per second, you'd get sick as a dog. But although my system, keep in mind, I only have a GTX 960. And the minimum is a 970. So my system isn't quite up to spec. I'm waiting for the 1070s to come out. I'm going to pick one of those up. But I play VR games, and some games I can do the 90 frames per second, but for a lot of them I can't, and it doesn't really matter. As a matter of fact, when I'm running fraps to record, the frame rate goes even lower. I'll get somewhere in the order of like 30, 40, 50 frames per second, and no nausea for me, no nausea for Sprite. Her friend Mo came over and used it, and he didn't have any nausea problems or anything. Some games like Fantastic Contraption, it can get a bit jittery because it's not keeping up. The frame rate isn't sufficient to keep up. So I mean, it's annoying in games where that happens. But in a lot of games, I'll be playing at like 30 frames per second, and the game still seems perfectly smooth, no problems. So if you're thinking that maybe your machine just doesn't cut it, as I said, mine doesn't quite meet the minimum requirements, and I'm also recording, which adds load. It still works pretty well, and we don't get nauseous, which is the most important thing. I mean, we've all played a video game where maybe you have your settings cranked up a bit too high, and the game runs a little bit laggy, a little bit choppy. The frame rate isn't as good as you'd like it to be, but you play the game, and whatever. I'm able to do that with VR games, and they don't make me nauseous. The only thing that I find, I mentioned in the comments, but I'll say it here, on the same day that our Vive arrived, our Google Cardboards arrived. And so we did a little playing around with that, and I found that even though it was entirely natural movement, where I was just moving my head around, looking at the selecting menus and things like that, I was still feeling nauseated. So the issue wasn't frame rate. The issue was the high persistence pixels on my Galaxy Note 2, which is the phone that I use in Google Cardboard. Whereas the new screens for the Vive and the Rift and such, they have low persistence pixels. So they don't stay on the screen as long, and so they don't cause the lag in the picture dragging behind you and kind of like vapor trails kind of thing. So that definitely causes nausea, even when you're doing completely natural movement. With the Vive, even though I can't maintain the necessary frame rate, I'm always doing natural movement. So there's no unnatural movement, no gamepad. I mean, yes, there are games that you can play on the Vive using a gamepad. I don't play any of them. And as a result of the natural movement, there's no nausea, even though in some cases I'm only getting a third of the frame rate that I'm supposed to have as a minimum in order to avoid nausea. So although your frame rate is always important, and you want to have as high frame rate as you possibly can, and yada yada yada, you're not going to throw your guts up if you can't maintain 90 frames per second. As long as you're using a headset that has low persistence pixels, so you're using either a very new phone, like maybe a Note 4 or an S6 or something along those lines, or using a Rift or a Vive, and you're using natural movement, no gamepad crap. The experience is just fine. As I said, a couple of games when the frame rate starts to tank, the image gets jittery, which is annoying. but it's not nauseating. So just a little tidbit I've discovered playing around with the Vive that might be of encouraging news to some of you out there whose systems aren't quite up to spec, but they're still interested in trying VR, and they can't afford to both get the VR headset and upgrade their video card. So, good news. Hopefully that will convince a few fence sitters that they should jump in and try VR. And I'll talk to you next time.